Minister Richmond, congratulations on your elevation again and on your return to Leinster House. And I'm glad to see that you're involved in this area because you bring an energy with you in whatever area you work in. So I look forward to seeing your progress as you work through this. My interest in the diaspora is the people who left Ireland of my generation. I travelled on the boat. Well, we travel abroad now and you meet people and they're there with their tablets and their laptops and they're qualified engineers, accountants, architects, etc., etc. People that left Ireland in my time, the only qualification they had was a shovel. And many of them didn't have English. Quite a lot of them were Irish speaking. And the mail boat was the saddest, most horrible trip. And the train then from Holyhead up to London. And lots of these people lived in dingy bedsits and survived. They lived tough lives, hard lives. They said for an immigrant, an Irish immigrant in London, if he met a good woman, he had some chance of making a life for himself. But many of them are now in their late 60s, early 70s, living in the same bedsit. I remember people saving up for a month before they came home and buying new clothes before they arrived home. And when they came home, they created this impression that they were living great lives and they had lots of money and it was a great world. And they went back then and they lived tough lives until the next trip home. And I recall one relative seeking out a relation who had gone to New York, who had been writing home for years about the wonderful life she had and blah. And they decided, well, she's not going to come home. We better go and see her. She's very elderly now. She might be dead. What they found was they found a woman living in abject poverty, who had lived in abject poverty all of her life. I spoke recently to the Irish ambassador, Martin Fraser, in London, and I have to say, tremendous empathy from that man and willingness to go the extra mile to try and meet members of the diaspora that maybe never hit the headlines, that maybe never made the big money, that maybe never, a lot of them never got home. And indeed, my colleague from Longford mentioned ones who died, and frequently we hear of an Irish person who died who has no relative, no one to see them off on their final journey. Communities come together and bring the bodies home. And indeed, I know our own Cathaoirleach does a lot of work in the United States with the diaspora, and that's hugely important as well. And I remember, and I know that the Cathaoirleach will know, we did a trip with Billy Lawless, God rest his soul, and when we were at the breakfast, there was about 300 or 400 people in the hall for breakfast, and it was a wonderful occasion. And as we were leaving the hall, one of the delegation turned to me and he said, I would hate to be poor and to be Irish today, because you couldn't afford the breakfast. The breakfast was a fundraiser. It was big, big money to get into it. So when we talk about the diaspora, let's also remember the ones that have been lost, the ones that have nowhere other than a dingy bedsit to wait to die in. And I leave it at that. Thank you very much for the time, Cathaoirleach.